Hello, American Studies students, English 6 students. I hope you guys are having a great day so far. We did not have a lecture for week 2, day 2 and 3, but we had your first assessment. So I wanted to go over what the assessment instructions are and make sure everyone knows what is required for this first assessment, 1 out of 4 assessments of the class. So if you go here, you can click on the directions, which are Google Slides, so your Muckracker article. For this writing, you have to act like you are a muckraker. So if you remember, we talked about during the progressive era language, there's a section on muckrakers. And when we talked about the Gilded Age, we went over all the different, or a lot of different muckrakers that existed in their work. So muckrakers are the people trying to clean up the muck, clean up that dirt and grime of the Gilded Age, rake it up in order to make the society that we're living in better, to improve society, get rid of these horrible things that existed, like horrible working conditions, living conditions, child labor, civil rights issues, all these different things that people were fighting against. Muckrakers were writing about, drawing about, trying to shed light on the dark of the Gilded Age during this progressive era. So you have to put yourself in their shoes. Pretend like you are a journalist writing during the progressive era, trying to reform, trying to create change, make a difference with your words. That is the purpose of this assignment. So again, put yourself in the shoes of a journalist seeking change during the progressive era. The question you should ask yourself and should be answering in this paper is what reform is necessary during the progressive era. Next, I have a list of examples. So during week 2, day 1, we talked about Ida Tarbell. She helped break up the Rockefeller monopoly on oil, break up Standard Oil into 30 plus companies, and she did this through her writing, The Great Story of Standard Oil. So this is an example of a muckraker using words, using writing to create real change in society. Here's another example about women's rights. What is feminism? And it talks about this new idea of feminists, the new idea. This is really where feminism starts. This is when women decide that they want to look, act, be perceived differently, have a voice in the political sphere. They want to vote. They want to be heard. They want what they want to be listened to and to create real change. And a lot of them wrote in magazines in order to get this across to the public. Another example, which we talked about week 1, day 4, is Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. Upton Sinclair wanted to shed light on immigrants. He also ended up creating reform in food standards, the Food and Drug Act. So people read his work. If you remember the quotes talking about the horrible conditions of these meat factories, it made people want to reform food. His purpose for writing this was to reform working conditions for immigrants and living conditions for immigrants. But this is just another example of a muckraker using their words to create real reform in the world. So what you'll need to do is pick one of these 6 options. So you can pick child labor and a reform of education, civil rights. That could be from the Chinese Exclusion Act to Ida B. Wells lynching to Webb Du Bois, all these different leaders that we have briefly addressed throughout the class. Then we have women's suffrage, which is the desire for women to vote. The right for women to vote won't happen until 1920 with the 19th Amendment. But you're still going to fight for this change. You're trying to fight for that amendment to be passed, fight for the ability for women to vote if you pick women's suffrage. Then for option 4, you can write about the temperance movement. So your article should be fighting for the ban of alcohol. You should talk about reasons why alcohol is seen as this bad thing, is reason why people should want it to be banned from society, how it hurts society. Number 5 is working living conditions. We talked a lot about this with the Gilded Age. We had tenement homes. You have children working in factories. You can even include child labor with working conditions. The Jungle talks a lot about the working conditions as well. So you can reference all that in your writing. And then The last option is corruption in trusts. So like the great story of Standard Oil from Ida Terbell, you could talk about how these monopolies, this inequality exists, and you have this extreme wealth with this extreme poor. So you can choose any of these options. You can choose multiple. So you can write about, like I said, you could talk about working conditions and child labor. If for some reason both of those are something you're passionate about, you can pick more than one, but you have to pick at least one of these to write about, and again, try to create change through your writing. So what you should do for your paper, do a little research. Hopefully you don't have to use a lot of online research. There has been a lot of examples. So the progressive era packet talks about every option that you'll see for this paper. And then day 4, day 3, and day 2 also can be used as evidence in your paper. So you shouldn't be doing a lot of outside research. You should really be brainstorming based on the information that we've talked about in class to write your paper. Once you get a good idea of what you want to write about, the background information that we talked about in class that you want to use, then start the writing process. Your paper should be about 450 words, and it should be persuasive. You're trying to convince people that either, for example, child labor is wrong, or that alcohol needs to be banned, or that we need to treat all races the same. Whatever your issue is, you need to persuade society that there's a problem and there needs to be reform. And then finally, add a picture to your article. I want images. A lot of muckrakers drew cartoons or took pictures like Jacob Rise in order to convince people that there was a problem. So add a picture, because a picture can tell 1,000 words. A picture can really pull at people's heartstrings. So I want you to include a picture to persuade your audience as well. Article structure. And I would look at your rubric to really go over what your paper should look like. But make sure you have a headline. When you think of an article, if you're going through the internet and you're looking through different information, the thing that you really notice is the headline. Most people will just read a news headline and that's all they read. That's all they know about that story. So the headline is really important. You want it to not only tell what you're writing about, so if you're writing about child labor, make it known that it's about child labor in your headline, but you also want to captivate your audience. You want it to be something creative, something that's going to draw people in just with that headline. Underneath your headline should be the byline, so your name. So it should be your name and then also the date of the article. Remember, this is supposed to be as if you're writing from the progressive era, so include a date that matches the progressive era. So around 1890s to 1920 would be the cutoff. A lead paragraph, so this is your first paragraph, your preview paragraph. This is where your thesis statement should be. So you make your claim because and give your reasons. So if it's child labor, for example, say we need to reform child labor and get kids in schools because, and then list 3 reasons, like children are getting hurt and killed, there isn't an educated youth that's going to create an educated population, and a 3rd reason. So you have to list your claim, what you're fighting for, and then give your reasons that you're going to give in your paper in that preview paragraph. But make sure you hook people in, you give important information. Think that when you're reading an article, okay, so the first thing people really read is the headline. If you get them in, if you hook them and you're able to get them read past that headline, most people just read that first paragraph. So your first paragraph should really say what you're writing about, what your paper is about, and hook them into the paper. Then you'll have your body paragraphs. This is where you have your evidence and support for your thesis. So you have your claim and your 3 reasons. Your body paragraph is there to really support those 3 reasons and that claim. It's just additional information, additional evidence to support what you are claiming, trying to persuade people of. Finally, you have your ending, your final summary, your conclusion. This is just where you reiterate your argument and give your final push, your final argument, your final reason for your claim, really trying to hone in your point and restate that thesis. And then, of course, add your pictures because a picture can say 1,000 words. All right, so more information on how to write a paper. So make sure you choose a progressive topic, then research for what you want to write about. Again, try to use things we did in class. You shouldn't spend a lot of time on research because we've been going over the Gilded Age and the Progressive Age thus far in the class. Make sure in your writing you're establishing your main points in that first paragraph and then trying to elaborate, trying to add support for what you say in your first paragraph in the rest of your paper. Adding primary sources, adding a witness can make your paper seem more real, more accurate, more truthful, because people want to know what it was like living in that situation. If you want to know what child labor is like, ask a child that is working in a factory, right? So using primary sources can be really beneficial to persuading people. So make sure when you are quoting or using information that you cite your evidence. We have talked about in-text citations and how to APA cite in a bibliography, which I'll go over at the end of this, but make sure you're citing your evidence. I don't want to read something that I know didn't come out of your head and not know where to find it. So make sure I know where you're getting your information from. And then I would recommend reading your article out loud before publishing it, before submitting it, in order to check your work. So again, make sure this paper is supposed to persuade someone. Muckrakers are writing in order to create real change in the world. So writing a strong thesis, your thesis is what your paper is about. So a persuasive claim like child labor needs to end and children need to be educated. And then because, and then 3 reasons, which are the 3 reasons you'll talk about in your paper. So an example, the government should pass legislation to protect children from capitalist greed. That's the claim because, and then give 3 reasons why children should be protected. Make sure to present logical arguments, but you want to also have emotions. So yes, have a fact in your reason. In your paragraphs, you should include facts, but also have emotion. It's okay to say child labor is wrong, it needs to end. You don't need to include a fact all the time. It's okay to have emotion. It's okay to be declarative. So even if it's your opinion, even if child labor is wrong is an opinion, make it sound like it's a fact. It's okay to declare it as if it's a fact. Be empathetic. Make people feel like they can see your position, feel like they can be in your shoes. And it's okay to repeat yourself. The more you repeat yourself, the more it gets stuck in people's brains to persuade them. All right. So those are the instructions. I have provided a template, so this is how you can go about writing your paper. So I would go through this and check all these boxes. So first maybe come up with a title, then your byline, and then work on this intro paragraph. The first thing you should do is write a thesis. So your thesis is your basis for your paper. The claim is what you are writing about. Your claim is what you are writing about, plus because, and then the 3 reasons are what your paper is going to be bulkily, your body paragraphs are going to be about. So you have your claim, because, your 3 reasons. That's the first thing you should do when writing your paper. And then your body is just explaining those reasons. So your 3 reasons go here. And then your body paragraphs are just giving more information on those 3 reasons. So I would use this template if you have trouble writing. Just go through this template even line by line and you should have a full paper by the end. I also have a checklist for you. And if you're confused on anything, then you can go through this checklist, make sure you have all the information. And there's also a rubric. I highly recommend going through the rubric. We did in class, but I would go over it before submitting your paper so you know exactly what you're going to be graded on. Additional information on how to cite sources is here. More research information, and then finally submit your paper here. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm here to help, and I also would love to review your papers before you submit it. So you can submit rough drafts to me and I'll review them Hopefully this helps. I hope you have fun writing your papers, and thank you for listening.